Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Composer Q&A panel. I'm Alexander Brandon, and to your right are the illustrious composers Gareth Coker, and we've got Gerard Marino and Darren Korb. And I'll let everybody introduce themselves. But I've worked on games like Unreal and Unreal Tournament, Deus Ex, and Dust and Elysian Tale, Tyrion, and Neverwinter Nights series. More recently, last year, Aven Colony, the strategy game that's published by Team 17. Check that out; it's actually quite a lot of fun. But we're here to answer your questions and find out what it is that you guys want to know about what we do. And you can seriously say how do you feel about what you do, and do you ever get depressed? Seriously, anything goes. So yeah, with that, I'll let everybody introduce themselves.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Gareth Coker. I'm an owner of 2 rabbits. I'm a connoisseur of fine dining. I'm an investor in cryptocurrency. Oh, and I write some music as well. Most of you will know me for my work on Ori and the Blind Forest. I also did the score for Ark Survival Evolved. I also contribute to Minecraft, principally the console edition. And I worked with Insomniac Games for the last 2 years on their VR title, The Unspoken.
I'm Gerard Marino, best known for the original God of War series, where I was the principal composer among a team of many. Also did some Spider-Man games, DC Universe Online. Most recently, I did the Worlds theme for League of Legends for this particular year's tournament. And I like fine wines and fine dining as well. I own no pets. 2 children, I think they count as pets. Certainly as messy as them, and twice as expensive. But that's that.
I'm Darren Korb, and I am the audio director for Supergiant Games. I did the music for Bastian, Transistor, and Pyre, and I am the 2010 National Rock Band Champion, perhaps my proudest achievement.
Woo!
Cool. Yeah, so what we're going to do is we have a mic up here, and we're just literally going to let you guys line up.
Ask us anything.
Yeah. AMA, so don't be shy.
No.
Hey guys, as your careers have gone on, has there been anything that's been surprisingly or unexpectedly gotten more difficult as time has gone on?
That's pretty interesting to me, because something like so when we were working on Transistor, one of the things that made that game in a lot of ways more difficult for us was that it was this sort of sophomore effort, and so you spend your entire life making your first album and 1 year making your second one or whatever. You know what I mean? That's that feeling of maybe the can I do it again? Can I do something different than I've already done? Is that the only thing I can do? And trying to push further outside of your comfort zone with each project and all of that. So in a way, I try to up the challenge for myself on each project, just to keep it compelling for me, so I keep learning and growing as a musician and a composer and all that.
Well, yeah, I've seen some changes. Alex has been in longer than me. I think the longest industry veteran probably had 3 or 4 more. But around 2008, there was the world economic meltdown. Activision laid off hundreds of people in studios and whatever. And a lot of the money went from console games. It got spread out a little bit more, so they made fewer console games and a shit ton more casual games, none of which have very good music budgets. So it's really just a lot of the money kind of went away from places where people would get hired to do a big fat amount of music for a big fat amount of money and keep your lights on for a year. So there's that. And then a lot of those people who got laid off are the people who would have been hiring me. So they're going off to make casual games. I wouldn't even want to insult you with the money that I'm paying for music. Well, insult me. What is it? Let me know. Give me the. first right of refusal. Like, no, I'm telling you. I'm not even going to tell you. So yeah, it's been, that's been a kind of a big thing, really, when everyone who knows you and loves you is not in the position to hire you anymore. Leave the game industry. Become composers themselves competing with you, you know? So there's been that, but, you know, it's always going to be like that, right? The world's going to go up and down, and you know, round and round. You just got to stay positive and keep at it, you know.
I think I'm going to echo kind of what Darren had with Transistor. Right now I'm working on Ori and Will of the Wisps, and I've never done a sequel before, obviously, because I haven't been around that long. So the difference between Transistor and Will of the Wisps is that we're doing a direct follow-on. So it's how do you make something new, make it better, but also make it familiar to everyone who, you know, liked the aesthetic and the music in the first game. And that's something that's not just me is battling with, it's the whole team, it's the art team. It's like, do we keep the style from the original game, or do we push it a little bit in a new direction? Those who saw the trailer back in May for Will of the Wisps will have noted that it was a lot more 3D than the original game. And so a lot of people noticed it and was like, oh, they're not sure about the direction of that. And so it's like, are we going to scale it back, or are we still going to keep pushing in that 3D direction? And it's the same with the music. You know, Thomas, our director, was like, I want a new main theme. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure? I won that fight. But I said what he really wants is a secondary theme, which is fair enough. But it's still, you've got to come up with it, you've got to do it all over again, and you've got to make it match the original. And there's no, you know, we just don't know how the public will react to it. Hopefully they'll react to it well, but that's kind of where I'm at the moment. And this time, the other thing is, we're not the Invisible Studio anymore. Everyone knows who we are, and it's probably the same with you guys as well. So there is an expectation. I read comments on YouTube. The soundtrack for Will and the Wisps will be amazing. I've written like 3 minutes of it. The game is going to look beautiful. I can't wait to see what they do, and there's just no guarantee. We hope that we'll do all of that, but there's the pressure and expectation, and hopefully we'll be able to deal with it, but we just don't know. That's part of the fun of being in the industry, but it was also difficult.
Yeah, I've been... I guess around a little while. And in that time, the people that I originally started with, there's really not that many that are still doing it. And the funny thing about that is that I've talked to a lot of them, and I still do. Like, I have regular chats with George Sanger, the Fat Man. Anybody familiar with George Sanger? All right. So, I mean, he did music for 7th Guest, 11th Hour. He and his team Fat also worked on Wing Commander, or Wing Commander 1 and 2, and they were, back in the day, they were the rock stars, like the people that like would walk around the Game Developers Conference, wearing cowboy suits with rhinestones on them, and everybody were like, those are the guys that are working on the games that I'm crazy about, but we were working with sound cards and General MIDI and all kinds of other stuff, and really nothing to do with live instrumentation or studio stuff. And when all that stuff started, there's certain assumptions that get made. Like, I remember, who's familiar with Jack Wall? He has worked on Call of Duty series, he worked on Myst 3, and he's a brilliant composer. He's really, really good at what he does, and a real nice guy. But I remember he was saying, it's just like, you're one of the only guys I've met that's been able to like translate or go through the transition of like going from old school 8-bit or 16-bit stuff and actually work with orchestras and all this gear and be able to write the kind of music I guess more people are expecting in terms of just, if you want to call it level of quality. I still don't really use those words when it comes to that, because back then, and retro is what is old is new again and all that kind of stuff. But I thought about it and I was thinking, I think it's less about people that are in a creative field not being able to cope with the technology or the business stuff or dealing with live players or anything like that. I think it's really more about the things that you guys were talking about reinventing yourself and really like trying to go through so many projects and not necessarily get burned out. That is an absolute real thing that can happen, is you write more and more tracks and you start really, your creative juice just sort of gets sapped, and you need to take breaks, and you need to be able to say, okay, I need to look at this from a really different perspective, just clear my mind and find out what really inspires me again after I've been through this several different times. So that's and as you're saying, and Gerard was talking about, some people just they go into real estate, they go do other stuff, they focus their brain elsewhere, and that's perfectly viable too. So yeah, but that is the hard part. Is the people that have been around. Will say like, oh, there's no way I can work on the next Call of Duty. Well, guess what? Like, even though Will Roger is like somewhat, relatively younger, but like he's still worked for a while in the industry, and he just did the latest Call of Duty game, and so I tell people that have the experience that I do is just be like, yes, we can still do that. It's possible. We've got the talent, we've got the chops. It's just a question of like changing our strategy, keeping the fires burning. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
How you guys doing?
Good.
I'm sure you're sick of seeing me by now, but come ask you guys a question. So I feel like being a composer is a lot like running a business. You have to promote yourself. You have to do a lot of things just to get your music to people's ears, of course. But I was just curious what you guys think about some important business tips that you guys have learned in your time in the industry?
I probably have the shortest answer to this, which is I don't really have one because I have a unique situation in that I don't have to do that. I'm super lucky in that I work at Supergiant Games. I am an employee there. I don't have to shop myself around. So I know that's not a typical position for most composers, but for me, when I get asked questions like this, my tip is not business so much as try to just be as good as you possibly can at the thing that you do and the thing that you're trying to offer. Because if you do that, it will get noticed. Just trying to hone whatever specific aspect of the craft that you're working on, or whatever your thing is, and try to define that and try to get as good as you can with that. For me, something that's been really helpful is to just be really comfortable with a particular piece of recording software. I use Logic Pro and I love it, and getting really fluent and good at that, and being able to take something from idea to good sounding finished thing all by yourself is a really valuable thing, and it could be definitely valuable for shopping yourself around too. Just having great sounding demos, for example, is a thing that would probably help.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that have zero to do with music that go with trying to be a composer. And so the business side of things, you got to keep track of taxes, or at least find somebody who knows how to keep track of it for you. And well, I don't know, the best advice I think is also be nice to everybody. Be a nice, likable person, even if you're not a very outgoing social person. A lot of us are introverted. Not me necessarily, but that might actually work against me, because so many folks in the industry are introverted, and I'm Mr. Loud, whatever. They're like, chill the fuck out, dude. So I don't know. Just make sure that you're not, you don't grate on people. Just try to be a nice, likable person, because we're going to get into in the trenches on games. There's always some kind of crunch, right? So who do you want to be under the ultra high stress situation of the crunch time with? Somebody who's not a complete spaz or basket case, I'd say, but also health. That's one of the most important things, just being happy in general in life. And so you kind of need to not be in the studio all day, every day. You got to go out and get some sun, some vitamin D. Have something to do outside of the studio that's, I don't know, at least walking. You got to get out, get some exercise, stay healthy. Because then when you get to the crunch, you can take it, as opposed to just getting beaten down. And if you get sick, you come to these conventions where you're up all night. A lot of people get sick, and then you got to go back and work sick. Health is probably the paramount thing. Do stuff that isn't music too. Live a life. I don't know. I'm a method composer too. I think if you haven't ever felt anything, if you haven't ever had your heart broken or been afraid for your life or something, how can you write music for a situation where that character is going through it? And that's not like go rob banks or anything, but you can ride a roller coaster and feel scared for your life, and you can can just try to go on a date with somebody and get your heart broken. So that's, that's enough. You can extrapolate that into whatever Spider-Man's going through. So anyway, yeah, it's outside of the studio stuff that isn't writing is going to help your writing, So there you go.
It's like almost a perfect answer from Gerard, especially the health thing. I got away with not doing any exercise for like 10 years, I would say, from like 20 to 30. As soon as you turn 30, it goes rapidly downhill.
So they tell me.
And then you have to start taking care of yourself. So I think if you're physically fit, you're also mentally fit. The two go hand in hand. And when you're mentally fit, you can actually write for longer if you need to. But that's the other thing. I think, and this is kind of getting a little bit off the business thing, but I think if you try and force yourself to write, like Gerard said, it's not going to happen. I only write like 3 to 4 hours a day, and that's when I'm busy. And that's by writing, I mean the actual act of composing. There's a bunch of other stuff you can do that isn't composing, that like uses the other side of the brain. But in terms of actually being creative, I mean, most of us just sit there and look at the blank monitor waiting for the moment to strike. And that is part of the composition process, at least it is for me. But I would never force it. So it's like Gerard said, go out and do something and experience the world. I think one important thing to get into the business side of things is I think it's really important to have an understanding of everyone's job in the process. Now, some composers are able to do everything themselves to a very high level, but if you end up working with an orchestra, you are just not going to be able to do everything yourself. It's physically impossible. For Ori and the Blind Forest, I did everything myself because we didn't have any money, and it was hell. We were doing copying. We had a session on day one, and then I was still doing copying after 9 hours of recording. I did copying all night for the session the next day with the full orchestra. The parts were being taped at the studio. It was a big mistake. But having done everything, and having done it to a high standard, because there weren't many errors in that, amazingly, I know how much everything costs. I know how long it should take. And so when I hire someone, I have an understanding of what I expect from them. And it's the same with engineering, it's the same with mixing, mastering, and also, the people who you might end up working with who are performing on your work. Try and get into their shoes for a little bit. Maybe just sit in a session and sit in the seat and see how difficult it is to sit there while I'm doing a recording with the strings and the brass have to sit there for 20 minutes doing nothing. And then it's like, okay, brass, now we need you to play this really difficult passage after you've been sat there for 20 minutes. Like, that's kind of annoying, and that's something you learn on the job. So I think I think it's really important to have an understanding of what everyone in the entire process is doing, not just the creation of the music, because then you can empathize with the people that you're working with, and then they like you more, and then they want to do their best for you. And when people want to do their best for you, that makes you look good, and then your client thinks you're good, and then hopefully the general public thinks your work is good too.
There's a long line here, so I want to make this quick, and sometimes we may not all necessarily have to have to answer, but there is one important thing that, tell me if this has already been covered. One of the conversations that happens a lot among composers, creatives, agents, and whatnot is how much do you charge for what do you feel your value is? And it is an ongoing discussion. It is not something that, unfortunately, that just has an answer that says, well, if you have this many years in the industry, you charge $700 a minute. If you have this many years in the industry, you charge $1,500 a minute. If only it was that simple or whatever. But a lot of people will say, don't ever work for free. I mostly believe that in that principle, but it depends on the situation. If there's a friend of yours who is doing something that is so inspiring to you that you're like, I just want to be a part of this, and you happen to be paying your bills in some other way, why not go for it, right? And it's something that that you're so fired up about that you just have to do it. friggin' do it, you know? Like, don't go on Facebook and say, I just worked for my buddy for free and it was great, so everybody needs to do it. No. You know, there's no rule that says you shouldn't do that. And in fact, I encourage people that are in those situations to do that sort of thing. However, when you have people that you're not that familiar with, like say, hey, I heard your music on SoundCloud, I thought you might be a great fit for this project, have a sit down and say, okay, well, here's the block of time that I think is going to be required to devote, and I'm not just going to do it half-assed. So if I'm going to put my heart and soul into this and my time, and that equals this, because this is what I need to live, plus whatever the value for the project is going to be, and there's all kinds of factors that work into that. So think of those things whenever you have a discussion with anyone about a collaborative effort of any kind, and just, you know, definitely don't go, you know, saying like, oh, it's okay to work for free and exposure and blah, 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 because yes, that makes it, for people that do work for a living, you know, making creative stuff, that doesn't make it easier. It puts things in people's minds that says that like, yep, we can have everybody work for free, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name's Devin. It's nice to meet most of you for the first time. It's great to meet you again, Gareth. I have 2 questions. First one should be quick. This may be more for Gareth and Darren, but do you guys have a method and process for schools to lease your orchestrations?
No. As far as I know.
Can we make a request to do so?
Yeah, you'd have to contact Supergiant, basically.
Okay.
I'm not the guy who knows the answer.
Okay.
The quick answer is yes, but it's not straightforward because Microsoft, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Assuming you were talking about Ori.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I mean, any of it's just red tape. It can be done though.
Okay.
Like Ori is being performed in August by an orchestra for the first time, like finally. So it's but no pre-records or anything like that. So yes is the answer, but yeah, just contact us directly.
Well, I'll ask you after. My next question is for you, Darren, and it's for Pyre. When you were working on the music for Pyre, were you also working in the implementation for how it got done in-game?
Yeah.
I was curious how much work and how much thought process really went into the way you did the progression of music in that game, specifically, you know, for progressing the music through the dialogue. Because that was, I think, the first impressive use of that I've seen for kind of dynamically changing the music over time.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good question, and something that I devoted a lot of thought and effort to during Pyre, because basically all the types of pieces you're referring to have about 7 different stems all playing at once in Fmod, and we have like a really complicated scripting setup to change which stems are playing based on what state the dialogue is in, if you're, you know, if a character's talking to you, or if you're reading some narration, or if you're in the wagon, or if you're not in the wagon, or all these other things. So there's all sorts of different state-based stuff going on, and that basically was something that I had to consider for the entirety of writing all the music that was going to be used in that way, because I had to have something playing constantly on every single stem in order to pay that off. So it was a real composing challenge for me, because I couldn't use one of my go-to tricks, which is you add stuff, you take stuff away, it builds it up and brings it back down easy, you know? So I couldn't do any of that. So it certainly forced me to seek other solutions musically, which was both a challenge and pretty compelling.
When you were putting the music in there, was it just kind of doing raw stem exports, or did you actually like break up their time frames so that they were separate files to make them easier to call on? Because I know each section is kind of its own loop that replays before it progresses to the next part. So I was curious about the implementation of that.
It actually wasn't like that.
Oh, really?
It
Okay.
was all one piece, like a 4-minute piece of music with stuff happening the entire time on 7 different stems. Like it was a whole. It wasn't sectioned. Yeah, we didn't do much of that. We did some, but not in the part you're referring to. That was all just.
So you more was blending between stems.
Yeah. So it actually it isn't doing that. Yeah, it's seven different stems. And they're fading in and out and stuff like that. But yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
If I can jump in on this one, the previous one. Sony Computer Entertainment America is very open to people doing things. The guy named Jason Swan over there, he's got a one-pager that you can understand. It's like English for doing one-offs. And so any Sony America title, you could probably very easily, just with one phone call or one email, get the permission and maybe even score. Talk to the composer first, maybe, and because they got the scores, and then you get the permission, and then there it is.
Would
and
that
you can make your own? You can make your own arrangement, maybe, out of the original thing. But also, I should, if you don't mind, Sebastian, this gentleman right here knows every damn thing there is to know about licensing. From like every company in the world, the difficult ones in Japan and the easy ones in, Barstow and everything in between. So just reach out, ask the composer first. A lot of us are just regular old dudes. Most of us are regular young dudes, maybe. But we're approachable. We're ready to go have a drink with you, and yeah, sure, fuck, we'll do whatever we can to get our music played by anybody. So yeah, don't be afraid. And also, Sony is so open to it. It's so easy to get permission from this giant multinational Hydra corporation. They're happy. They're happy to help. So there you go.
Great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Hi, first I got 2 real quick ones. One's more of a statement, the second one's a question for the whole panel. First one, Gareth, huge fan of ARC. I've played about 1,000+ hours into the game, so I'm very familiar with your work. Have yet to play Aberration, and I'm looking forward to hearing what's come out with that. My buddies and I run a server, so we haven't figured out how to make everything work together with the mods that we normally use. But yeah, huge fan of ARC.
Thank you.
Really appreciate everything you did there, and I think one of my favorite little tweaks that you make on what you do is during the holidays, the Halloween events, the Christmas events, just the little tweaks you make that add that little extra feel to it. So I just wanted to say I'm a huge fan of that.
Thank you.
The next one's for the panel. I'm going to ask you to pick your favorite kid. So what's your favorite project that you've worked on? And do you have a favorite song from that project?
That's a really, really difficult question to answer. A lot of people, a lot of responses you might get are, "Oh, my favorite project is the last one."
Yeah.
I mean, different projects have different things about them that are favorites or not favorites. So, most recently, Avon Colony was great because I got to write a full score for the first time in I don't know how long, and it was really epic. I got to combine stems together of synthesis plus orchestral stuff and do the whole 9 yards, and it was a lot of fun. And the guy that was contracting me for it, if I sent him an invoice, I got paid in 2 days. Mm-hmm. And so, as you might imagine, that. Oh my gosh.
That happens all the time, right?
Yeah. Now, that's another bit of business advice is that, there's this thing called net 30, which is, usually you get 30 days, but that turns into 60, 90, and never, right? So,
Never 30.
And Darren doesn't have to worry about that. No, I am happy for that guy. Seriously, that's friggin' amazing. Avon Colony was great, but the thing that will always, stick with me is Deus Ex, and that's mainly just because they let us pretty much do whatever we wanted. The game is eclectic and all over the place as far as style and instrumentation and pacing and all that kind of thing, but people loved it. And on the sequel to that, we were instructed to be much more cohesive and much more ambient and much more subtle. And even though technically it fits with the gameplay and the environments a lot more closely, the people that were fans of the series didn't like that. They were just like, we like the thematic stuff that you did on the previous game and the catchy stuff and the things that we can hum. So that's pretty much how that worked. So, but all projects have their favorite aspects for me.
I'll give you a quick answer. It's actually Arc, to be honest. I know people would expect me to say Ori. I would have said Ori 2 years ago, but Arc allowed me to record at Abbey Road with 93 players. And it's kind of tough to forget that. So, and my favorite track is the Overseer track, which is the final boss, as you know. That track at parts gets up to 200 beats per minute, so it's a really, really fun and wild track to compose. And the version that's on the soundtrack is Take 2 by the orchestra. Take 1 we heard, and then Take 2 is the final recording, which was pretty cool, because I thought it was going to be really difficult, and they just nailed it. So I'm like, okay, we're done.
God of War 2, hands down, easy. As far as the, over an hour of music I wrote for that one, including, they're like, okay, we need a new theme for Kratos. Darth Vader didn't need a new theme for Return of the Jedi. But anyway, so they made me do it anyway, and that's actually probably my favorite track. We turned it into a metal track for Guitar Hero, which is now still the reigning most downloaded PlayStation DLC for Guitar Hero to this day. Of course, they shut it down, but you know that when I was ahead. So, but anyway, easily that. The hard one was God of War 1 was really a tough thing. There was a whole lot of fingerprints all over it. And then after that, it's like the directive was, you guys knocked it out of the park last time. If you just do precisely that again, we'll be happy. So push it out if you want to. And so everybody on the team pushed it out, and I really pushed myself all the way to the edge of my talent, I think, and I got to write a whole bunch of new crazy themes, and just the whole score, just everything about it was great. We recorded the brass at Abbey Road, I was here still writing, and it was just like that. I was writing, it would go to the orchestrator, like at 5 o'clock, he'd stay up all night orchestrating it, the copyists would put it together, and then it'd be on the stands for the afternoon. And it's still this day, I feel like that's probably the best writing for me, in my personal estimation of my own stuff. Everybody usually, it seems like Tchaikovsky and those guys hate their best work. So maybe my best work's something I'm not going to like in the future, but GW2.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I'm gonna take kind of a cop-out answer and say Pyre, because it was my most recent one. There's a number of reasons that was really fun to work on for me, and rewarding, just because it was probably the closest to stuff I would make just for funsies, like by myself, maybe, of all the stuff I've done. Which was cool to be able to do in a style that would fit something I was working on. And I think maybe my favorite track to work on was probably Thrash Pack in that one, just because it's so silly and not at all like anything else I've done, and also just super fun. I got a chance to rock out, which I don't get to do that much. So maybe that one.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Is there anything you guys do to get into a state where you feel like you're more creative? I guess you would call it like focus or flow, where you're working for hours at a time without stopping. Like, is there a certain time of day? Do you use a potent cocktail of drugs? Is it, what do you do to get to that state where you're just working?
That's maybe a question for the bar later.
That's changed for me a lot over the years. Before, when I worked from home, up until the end of 2014, I worked from my apartment in Brooklyn, and then I moved to the Bay Area, and now I work at the office, at the studio. And, I have to wear pants now, for one thing. It's different. It's a new thing for me. I'd never worked in an office before. I can't, have my dog on my lap, while I compose or whatever. So it's just a change, because, before I would sort of work a little bit kind of all the time, and then every once in a while I'd be like, oh, okay, and I go and stay up all night and work and whatever, and kind of work as inspiration struck. But then, I had a kid, I started working at the office, and so certainly I had to reorient how I find creativity, and not just sort of hope, take breaks until I figure it out, It was like work, I can't think of anything, I'm gonna take a break. It was sort of, I would do that a lot. And now I've gotten better at compartmentalizing, okay, I'm at work, I'm going to work and I will make something and I'll think about it when I'm not at work maybe, but I'm not gonna, I will leave it at work as much as I can. And for me, really, it's all about experimentation when I'm writing. And as long as I'm doing something that I don't fully understand, it's always interesting to me. So I'm trying to always, write using instruments that I don't know how to play very well, and do messed up guitar tunings and just stuff that totally moots all of whatever musical training I may have. That's the stuff that's exciting to me and gets me into a creative place. It's just wandering and trying to find my way in the dark, basically.
Okay, the drug cocktail. It's basically caffeine, but there's this thing called theanine, which is like the thing in green tea that is calming, and so you can get it in pill form. So it's like drinking an entire gallon of green tea in one pill. And what it does is that way, if you're going to have that third cup of coffee at 10 in the morning, then you take one of those. It evens out the jitters, so you're awake, focused, but not, edgy. So that's the cocktail. It's I think everyone uses caffeine to a certain extent. And as far as getting in the space, well, for writing themes, I kind of have to not be at the piano, have to be away, because otherwise I'm trying to see it, That next note is on there somewhere. That one? No. That one. So yeah, it's now I'm into that. It's like what I can play on the piano, and I'm not going to play or anything. So as far as themes go, the shower, the car, and a hike are the three main ones. And I've also, when working out, had them come in. When you're doing something else, and your brain's just a little bit outside of itself, it'll come around. Usually the melodies will. And so you got to have your phone ready and sing it in there, because it'll be gone.
You sing out loud into the phone?
Oh yeah, right into the phone, and it sounds like it's ridiculous, it's hilarious, but and I know what it means later, but otherwise it's gone. Like one time I wrote a theme when I was riding my motorcycle, and I can't stop, I got the helmet on, and I kept singing it over and over again. It's like, I gotta say, this has gotta be great. And I parked the thing, and then the maintenance guy says hi to me, poof, it's gone. Yeah, once it's gone. But they always come, another one comes, so you just gotta go take a shower or something.
Yeah. Cool. You guys don't have
not so much. It was based on what Darren was saying about going outside your comfort zones and trying different things. It reminds me of a story of Steve Vai auditioning for Frank Zappa to be in Frank Zappa's band. So what the first thing that Zappa did was he put some sheet music in front of him and said, play that. And so he was like, okay, I'll play it. And the reason that Zappa wanted Vai to out there in the first place was because he transcribed a whole bunch of his music in order to be part of Zappa's band. He was just like, look, I want to show that I can actually, completely understand this stuff and be able to put it into copy and have it out there. So he plays the thing and he says, okay, now play it in 7/8. And he was like, okay. He's figuring it out and has to do it, translating it live and all that stuff. And so he plays it in 7/8. And he goes okay, now play it in 7/8 reggae. And so at that point, Vi was just like, I can't do that. And Zappa's response was, well, I hear Barbra Streisand's band is looking for a guitarist. And at that point, the point being is that pushing yourself in directions that you're just like, oh, geez, maybe I don't really like that. But there's always, for me, there is something to admire in just about every genre of music. And there's a lot of people that just be like, I don't listen to country and I don't listen to bluegrass, or that stuff sucks. And why am I saying that in a Southern accent? That's
I was going to say that's the wrong accent for that one.
Yeah, exactly. Traitor. But no, and there's people that that say that hip hop, there's no good hip hop anymore, and which is not true. And so there's things that I like. I'll listen to lots of different genres of music. like I don't know, I was listening to Art Pop by Lady Gaga the other day, and even though the actual lyrics to those albums is just like, oh, really? Okay, whatever. Some of the music is freaking amazing in that. Like, there's this song, I think Venus, that has like these jazz type synth stab pads in it that are just really kind of in your face and awesome, but you know, a little bit 70s, but not too cheesy 70s, kind of neat and new in that way. So that kind of got me fired up in a certain way, not necessarily to write something that moment, but like, you know, that's part of what gets, you know, the engines warmed up in order to be creative.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have the least inspiring answer, so I clean. I clean my studio. I cannot write if there's crap everywhere in the studio.
Pretty good.
Now, once I've started, it can reaccumulate, and that's fine. But in order to start, it has to be free of. You know how things build up.
Right. I've read The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up.
Right. But while I'm doing that, I also listen to music that is anything except film or game soundtrack music, and that's something that is very, very important to me. Everyone's always like, "What's your favorite film soundtrack? What's your favorite game soundtrack?" And I can't give you an answer because I just don't care. Because most of them were influenced by non-film or game soundtrack music. That's always what's interesting to me, like because we all learn by listening to other things. So what I want to know is, you know, if there's a soundtrack I like, I'm like, okay, well, where did this composer maybe get inspired to come up with that idea? So yeah, listen to anything except film or game soundtrack music. It's okay to listen to that stuff, but like, I encourage you or encourage everyone to go a little bit beyond that.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and I'll add, I certainly take most of my musical inspiration from non-game, non-film places for sure.
Hey guys, thanks for taking time to be with us today.
You are a long way from home.
I am. Yeah, so it's my first MAGFest. I think this follows up from what you were just saying then, actually. So I've been a specialist in medieval music for the last 20 years, and I'm composing and performing that sort of music for 20 years. But I was interested in, a lot of, when I talk to video game composers, one of the lines that you hear a lot is, oh, you've got to get your name out there, And that's kind of the top level point. But I'm really interested in what lives under that, like what's the detail in the modern industry. What platforms do you use? How do you get the right people to hear the sort of music that you're doing in this day and age? Because you were saying it's changed a lot from say 10 years ago.
I do have hopefully a good response for that. Yes, there is getting your name out there, but I have another story to relate, not about Steve Vai this time, but let's see, Artie Rogers, yes, is the head of, oh my gosh, they do the Banner Saga series. Stoic, yeah. So Stoic happens to be in Georgetown, which is my home, where I live as well. And I didn't know that. I thought they were like an Austin company, but somewhat close by. But he, and his team, they work pretty much remotely. But his house is in Georgetown, and it turns out that our kids went to the same swim thing. And we ended up talking. I didn't do any pitching or anything. I just said, hey, I enjoyed Banner Saga. I think it's really cool. I loved Austin Wintory's score for it. I think it's really, really cool. And I left it at that. And he's just like, oh yeah, well, it'd be great if we could work together sometime, but I'll let you know. And I'm just like, I'm not asking to, But he went right into a story about how the sound designers that are from Australia, is that where?
That's where I'm
okay, I just wanted to make sure I get it right. Because it could be Kiwi or New Zealand or stuff like that. So the sound design team's in Australia, and he described how they got the gig. They sent a long email about the Kickstarter and what they saw in the Kickstarter and exactly how they would approach the sound design for Banner Saga. And they, what the techniques they would use, the inspirations they had from the visuals, which are really unique and awesome. And so getting your name out there is what I call the shotgun approach. It's literally like, okay, everybody, you should at least know what my name is, but that doesn't mean they know what you love and what drives you and what's passionate and what's really going to attach you to something in particular. So he said that's what made them stand out. They emailed us directly. they gave this long explanation about just how into the project they were before they'd even played it, and they described their passion, and that's what sold us, as opposed to, here's my demo, here's this generic set of blah, 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 da, 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 da. And so I tell a lot of people that, like, you know, just really think about what, you know, medieval stuff, there's quite a few games that could benefit from that particular style. You can, you know, just pick one and just be like, hey, this is my wheelhouse. I think I'd be a great fit for you.
Yeah, I'm going to continue on what Alex has said. I think it doesn't actually matter which platform you use, but whatever one you decide, you've got to be committed to it. I think it's there's a couple of composers who somehow manage to do Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of it, and I don't know how they find the time to do it. But I think you're better off just sticking to one. If you have the time and resources to do all of them, then by all means. If you can commit to all of them, then that's great. I got Ori because I had a very active profile on moddb.com, which is a pretty small and niche website. But a lot of developers hang out there. And Thomas Mahler, the director, he just sent me an email. He said, would you like to do the prototype for this game I'm working on, which it wasn't even called Ori at the time. He sent me the prototype, I played it, and he said, if you do it for free, I'm gonna pitch it. We need you to write 10 minutes of music, and if our pitch is successful, you can do the music for the whole game. The rest is history. So, but I was very active on that forum, also on that website, and I think you can sign up to as many as you want. But like, if you're signing up to forums and websites and saying, "Yeah, here's my profile, please listen to my reel," no one cares because you haven't spent any time there. And we get, and I'm sure Darren has this as well. We get at Moon Studios probably 8 to 10 composer reels every week, like, or if asking if I need an assistant or anything like that, and it's like, it's literally just, here's my stuff, please listen to it. Do you need any help? And it's like, they just all go in, and half the time my name is spelled incorrectly as well. Which, that's like instant failure. The shotgun approach, it works if it's well thought out. But yeah, and just be committed to whatever platform you choose.
Yeah. That's a nice speech there, Mr. Cooker. But no,
that's not the worst.
I'll bet. So, you know, there's also, like you say, you're doing early music. That's just kind of like your thing, your wheelhouse. So you do the shit out of that, you know, be the king of that, and just everyone in that industry or that little niche or whatever, if everyone there knows you, then anyone who needs something like that is going to find out about you organically that way. Yeah, you know, of course you got to have some social media presence this day and age. You really should. You know, you just you might be shutting down possibilities for yourself of being found. So, you know, kind of if you can, by, you know, as far as getting your name out there, you just become somebody. You know, just do stuff. You know, just continue to write, make music, whether or not you're doing it for somebody or for yourself. You know, a lot of times that energy just pulls stuff in.
We're getting some hum in the...
We chill
some feedback there.
Chill the thing a little bit here. I don't know if this does it too.
I think it may be from that.
It might be from that one. But anyway, but as far as like say, I should not have landed the God of War game. But it's because, and really I can trace it back to having lived in this particular apartment when I moved to Los Angeles, and a dude moved in the week after I moved in, whose best friend in grade school's dad started a music library in Los Angeles a couple years later, and so he introduced me to him, and he introduced me to Sony. And it's you know, the long, the short of it. So yeah, they wouldn't have ever even thought to look at me, and also they were doing everything all wrong and not telling anybody anything. Everybody demoed 3 or 4 times, and all the usual suspects demoed for that game 3 or 4 times. Nobody even told any of us until the very last time that it's ancient Greece. You know, so you're writing the most evil character music ever. So, but what does that mean? So, you know, and it's got to be heavy metal plus opera, and you know, so they even hired Ron Fish to write Primordial Soup music first, and he still didn't even know it was set in ancient Greece. Wow. And then they put it in the game and it sucked. It didn't work. And so and they said, well, you know, you guys figure out what you got to do. I got to go score Godzilla. And so he quit God of War, so it goes back out into the thing. So, you know, but that was all organic because the dude's moving in the same week I moved to Los Angeles, and there's a dulcimer and a didgeridoo and some bongos. I'm like, oh, you're a musician? Yeah, man. I'm a composer. Oh, cool, man. You need some help? Yeah. So I help him move in, and bang, here I am today. Just because, you got to be open-minded. I talk to somebody in an elevator too. So that's the other organic approach.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have wonderful insight in this particular area because, again, my buddy who I was friends with since we were 8 years old co-founded Supergiant Games and asked me to do it, and that was it. Like, it was like, okay, get in a time machine, go back to when you were a kid, befriend talented people, like, I don't know.
You probably wouldn't have been able to tell it.
Right,
that guy was going to be
You
that
have to
guy.
wait until, you're an adult, and then and then a time machine, yeah. So, but no, I mean, I think to sort of add to what Gareth is saying, if you're going to get your name out there, really target that as best you can, I think. I mean, because, Supergiant, we get, like, tons of emails about, like, hey, I like your music. I would like to do it instead of you. It's like, it's just like, like had they done like an ounce of research, they'd know like I do the music for Supergiant. It's like, that is a silly thing to write to me. It's like, like, no, I want to do that. That's why I'm doing. So, for example, right? So just make sure that stuff is targeted and you do your research first, because there's nothing worse than there's nothing that makes you click delete faster on an email than like your name being misspelled. Just like someone who didn't do their research and is clearly like it's a form thing, or like they didn't give a shit and they're just like shotgunning it out. It's like I don't want any part of that shotgun blast. Sorry. Yeah, but there you go.
Time machine, got it.
Yeah,
No,
time
no,
machine.
finish.
Yes, time machine. There you go. That's it.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Teddy. I'm currently in a master's program for music, and I'm writing a thesis paper about how video game music enhances the player's experience. So with this being said, for the entire panel, when you write your music, what exactly do you put in your music that you want the player to experience?
Secret Merino sauce.
I would say that it is different in every single case with every single game. There's something will speak to you about like, okay, I reached out to Anton Kudin, who's the head of the Megasphere project, if anybody's familiar with that game. It's an indie game, and it's a Metroidvania-style platformer that has these really cool visuals. And I said, like, hey, I'm sure you probably got somebody helping you out with this, but I just want to say I think your game is really cool in the following ways. And these days, of course, I have the advantage of they recognized who I was and said like, oh my gosh, we don't have money, and I didn't say anything about that. I'm just saying I like what you're doing. It's kind of cool. Every day on Twitter. I know this is getting back to like, it's not about getting the gig. I'm just talking about like what particular aspects of the game inspire, right? So and speak to what the music needs to do. So Anton will release a little animated GIF of some effect that has to do with like an actual game mechanic. Like, so like it could be these big, huge bubble things that fire out of a gun that enable you to platform your way in different spots. There's things that look like electricity that you have to work your way through. And every time it's something different and kind of cool, as a matter of fact, not just gimmicky or whatever. And since they're so fascinating, that's what spoke to me. And I'm thinking like what would the music necessarily do in that particular case? Or is it something that exists linearly? And they have their own system that uses like, a bunch of loops that do various things and that layer in different ways. And but in the case of Ori, it's as far as I know, it's somewhat, it's this really structured, layered, like, dynamic approach that just like really, it's soft where it needs to be soft, and then it lifts up, and everything gets really powerful at the right moments, and it's almost like you scored it completely custom at every single step of the way. It's like whatever happens, it's like, oh my gosh, like there's a cue that seamlessly just transitions into whatever. And so obviously that's what worked for that particular project. Not to speak for you, I'm sorry. But yeah, it's what really speaks to you. And typically it's where it used to be, you would write a minute loop and you would have just something that would be somewhat catchy. right? And that would just be it, and you'd have a certain number of voices to work with. Now, it's like, look for the points in the game that you're just like, what aspect of the game mechanic really fires up your inspiration as a game player? And then translate that into like, oh, okay, if that really gets me fascinated, how does that work? How would that work musically?
It deeply, deeply depends on what kind of game it is, obviously. So I'm just going to focus on like narrative, single player. I played Ori for hundreds and hundreds of hours, and that's not always practical for everyone, and especially on big open world games, it's impossible. But I feel like it's really important that composers play the games they work on. Because a lot of the time, you're often getting a long spreadsheet, just like a list of cues. I mean, you need cues for level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you might know how they get put in the game, but you might not, because you might be just passing them off to an audio team who implements it for you. And that might be okay, but like, it depends on how in sync with the audio team the composer is, and it's not always the case. So Alex is right, like Ori, I kind of did score it like I would score a film, except I've obviously got to take into account that like games, the player could stay in the same place for like 10 minutes. But I didn't really care about that, because I was like, well, if the music isn't annoying, they're not going to care. And the best example I can think of this from recent years is the Witcher 3 soundtrack. The Witcher 3 just doesn't have, at least from what I know, because having talked to the composers, they don't have an interactive music system which like changes dynamically. They literally just have loops that play while you're in combat, and then there's a little stinger at the end, and it's done. But it's good music.
Yeah, really good.
So, and that's like, if you've got to be able to like evaluate your music a little bit. Like, does music sound good? Like, will the player not get annoyed? So you've got to be like really, really critical and like not be a composer. And then when you're evaluating your work, you've got to imagine that you're a player. And you've got to be honest with yourself, like, is this music getting annoying? So I try and put myself in the point of view of the player whenever I'm doing a single player narrative game. What do I want the player to feel? And then I will play it myself. And if I don't feel anything, I don't send it to the team. It does not. No one else hears it until I feel like the emotion that I want to feel when I'm playing myself.
Yeah, I think I have like a slightly more general answer, which is, the things that I always try to put into the music are, for me, reinforcements of the tone of the game. Like that's my main goal all the time. Basically, is what is the tone? What is the emotion of this particular moment in the game? What is the vibe that we want with all the assets, with all the art and narrative and everything? What is the tone, and how can I reinforce that? And that's always the question I'm asking myself on 100% of the pieces that I make.
Well, yeah, what Gareth was saying, I'm going to back it up too. There's interactive systems sometimes, and sometimes people want to really make a complicated interactive system that winds up not being so wonderful as far as when it gets in practice, and if time's running out and there's not a big enough team and nobody can keep tweaking it. Yeah, like Amazing Spider-Man, we have this really complicated thing, and it's just at the implementation stage, the ta-da, we start fighting, and now we're fighting, and then there's another layer down, so when there's not as many people fighting, when you go back to re-heal, and then when you're done fighting,
Yeah.
well, there's this big section in the asylum where you drop down to beat up one robot, and so it's like this big damn production for one robot. You can't even get through the 30-second before the thing is supposed to change in the first place, and then big frickin' finish. Every time it's like, oh, dude, you should just put it, on that section, just put like the low-level loop and just let it roll all the way through. Yeah, I'll do it. And then another build would come, it's on the list. If the list was too long for him to do. So, it's got to be good music, first and foremost. And I always go back to Quake. Quake 1, the music in that is, Trent Reznor did it, and it just plays off of the CD-ROM. So when you walk into the level, it just plays off of the CD-ROM, it picks a track, but it's long, dynamic, good music. It feels like that game is scored. You're like waiting to go around the corner because there's an ogre somewhere and the music. It feels scored, but it's totally, totally not. So as long as it's good music, the people don't get annoyed with.
It's like if you have good music, then yeah, you can break it up after the fact if you need to. But I've heard, I'm not going to name any names, but I've heard some stories of like some composers who have come into projects and they've been presented with this incredibly complex interactive system before they've even written a note.
Oh yeah.
And so you're already incredibly restricted. It's like, and you're not even sure if the game even needs such a complicated system. So if anyone is a game developer here, it's like, get the music written first, and then see if you need to break it up.
Precisely. Amazing Spider-Man. He wanted every piece of music to be a 15-second attachable to every other 15-second of 80 minutes of music. It's like, that's going to be shitty music. 80 minutes of terrible.
So bad,
Well, gentlemen, with your answers, because I'm still writing my paper, this may be a long shot, but is it possible to contact you gentlemen to use your answers for my paper?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I don't have one of those. It's just Darren at supergiantgames.com. You can email me there. Yeah.
All right. Actually, and this is my first time here, so thank you very much for answering my questions and stuff.
Yeah.
And I hope
Thanks
to have
for coming.
Yeah,
And good
no
luck.
problem. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah.
We have a half an hour left and a somewhat still long line, so what I think we're going to do now is we'll keep it to one question per person, if you can think of your most important question, and then we'll probably, not all of us will necessarily answer, every question. We'll at least get you a couple of answers per, so that we can get everybody through the line.
I was just wondering, do you have any fun composer horror stories in the industry?
I'll make mine quick. John Romero's feedback was only two descriptors. One of them was make it more badass, and if it was really bad, he would say that's ass. He's a great guy, though.
Well, sometime in the middle of God of War 1, David Jaffe said, "Why does all this music fucking suck?"
There you go.
That's not something you like to hear. After you've been told you can't write anything above the C above middle C, and not anything like a melody that's those half notes kind of sound like a melody. There people are going to get tired. I don't know. So after you've been hamstrung, then they say, "Well, why does music suck?" Well, let me tell you why. Maybe not tell you why. Let me just try something else. Break the rules you gave me. Yeah. Anyway, so.
This is, I guess before I started doing games, I did a couple of little TV things and film, and basically everybody always had temp music that they were really attached to already, and in almost every case, I only did a few things, but in pretty much every case, they're like, hey, can you just make it sound like this temp music, but legally not that temp music? So Coldplay, but legally a little different from Coldplay.
Do games not use temp music?
Sorry?
Do games really not use temp music?
Well, not the ones that I've worked on. I mean, I'm sure they do. If the composer comes in later, but I'm writing at the same time. Everything else is being made, so we don't, there'd be no point in using temp music for us. But that's something that I think is pretty common.
Make the music sound more green. I'm serious. Oh my God. And we probably all have stories like that where you get crappy feedback from a client, and you have to figure out what they mean. Make the music sound more green meant add marimba. So
that makes sense.
My Make It Green story. It's a commercial for the Chinese version of what Preparation H is. So it's a hemorrhoid cream commercial, and so the director was, it's edgy up until the point we see the product, and then that's where we need it to be cool and refreshing.
Yeah.
And so everybody's turning the first one, and he's like, okay, yeah, that is cool and refreshing, but that's nighttime cool and refreshing. I want daytime cool and refreshing. Like, what?
Amazing.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Hi. Do you ever have a piece where you can't feel like it's not good enough, or it sounds too much like something else you've heard or done?
Every single piece of music
Every
I
time.
ever write is not good enough.
I found out after the fact on Deus Ex that someone said, hey, that sounds exactly like the X-Men cartoon theme. And I was like, I hadn't actually heard it, but I was like, I can see where okay.
If you look hard, if you look hard enough, like you can probably like look at every piece of film and game music and find where it's been written before. So there will always, if you go onto YouTube, there'll be some annoying person that has said, "Oh, he totally copied that piece from another soundtrack or something." So yeah, it happens all the time. But I think in the grand context, I've stopped worrying about it because the chances are it has been written already. But it's all about the surrounding context, I think.
And for me, if I notice it, like, oh, well, this sounds like this other, I'll just like write something different. If I notice it, I won't do that, unless it's like a little reference on purpose. But if I notice something something I'm writing is sounding like something else, I won't do it. And if something, basically, what I'll try and do is I'll try to get to the point. I won't self-edit too much before I've made something. I used to have kind of a bad habit of doing that, and that would like paralyze me. So I try to just make stuff to the point where at least I can evaluate it. And once I can evaluate it, if I don't like it, just throw it away, save it. Don't throw it away, but save it and leave it on the shelf and just do something else. Because there's, not really a point in butting your head against something that you're not inspired by, at least for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know a lot of compositions are essentially made to order, but do you often end up finding yourself taking heavy inspiration or repurposing older unreleased works or unfinished ideas?
I don't usually. Yes and no, because basically I end up using pretty much everything I make on a project, for that project. So if there is a piece I've thrown away later, like at the end when I'm like, well, we need a few more pieces, like I'll go back. So I guess the answer is yes in that sense. I am kind of repurposing it. But it's for the same purpose it was really intended, so it's not really repurposing, but it's just sort of picking it back up when I have fresh ears, coming back to something that I've left on the shelf and just kind of finding a new path to get it to something that I like that I couldn't find at the time I was working on it before.
Well, I have, like in a sequel situation, there might be some things that you wrote that didn't quite fit the scene or whatever it was. Like there was a theme for Rhodes, the initial concept art for Rhodes and God of War 2. It was a big, shiny, nice summer day. But then so I wrote this big, shiny theme, but then it turns out, it's nighttime, it's lightning and shit, so then it just was not right. So, so that was just sitting there, but then it comes time to do something else in another game, it's like, well, maybe I already wrote this. This is actually written for the same universe, so so you can pull one of those in and turn it into a combat track, and then it sounds like God of War because it was in the first place. It just wasn't used. So yes, and there was this big tragic middle section to the original Kratos theme that got thrown away, and then I brought it back for Chains of Olympus when he's got to push his daughter away to save the universe. There it goes, and it was perfect for that cinematic. So. Yes.
My answer is an emphatic no. So I refuse to reuse anything, even on Ori 2. So I threw out probably about an hour of music on Ori 1. There's an hour of music that no one is ever going to hear. But you could save yourself time by like reusing it for Ori 2. But the thing is,
I think I know somebody who would like to put that album out.
The thing is, like, when I wrote Ori, it was 2013. I wrote most of it in 2014, and it's a snapshot of my life at that time. We're all living life, and like different things happen to us, and so I don't want 2013, 2014 me in what I'm going to write in 2018. So probably in almost everything I do, probably for every project. There's going to be like 20% that people will never hear. Ha.
So there, yeah.
It's just, not me personally, but there was a composer that I worked with, Jason Graves, and at the time Jason Graves was with Rod Abernathy, and they were known as Red Note Audio, and they provided some tracks for Gauntlet 7 Sorrows, and it was great stuff. I worked with with both of them again on Alpha Protocol by Obsidian Entertainment. But I noticed in one of their demos for, I'm pretty sure it was a different game, one of the tracks sounded exactly like one of the Gauntlet tracks. I was just like, I didn't say like, hey, what the fuck, man, what'd you do that for? Yeah, no, nothing like that. I think I might have, gently queried about it, years later, and I don't know what the response was, or just like, whether it was, oh my God, I'm so sorry, or something like that. But that was an interesting situation. And it does not mean that Jason like reuses his tracks either. Like, he has this really, really strong feeling of like, you can see how he handled the Dead Space score. I mean, just like, it was this pretty amazing, very unique approach to recording orchestral instruments. So, but yeah, I mean, I've seen it happen, obviously, but I haven't really done it so much myself.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What's up, guys?
Hey, how's it going?
So, what's the biggest mistake you've made in your career, and what was like a takeaway from that, like a good lesson?
I can point to a couple of things that where my career would have turned out very differently. One of them was Chuck Dowd from Sony said, right after I started at Midway as audio director, hey, come and be a music supervisor up at Sony Santa Monica and work with Clint Bajakian. And I think it would have been on God of War stuff and other things like that, which would have been a lot of fun and very cool. But even more, sort of not regretful, just different, is that Emil Pagliariardo, I can't pronounce his last name very well, but he's a creative lead at Bethesda. He had just left Ion Storm, and he said, hey, we need an audio guy at Bethesda. And that was before Morrowind, and it was before Fallout, and it was before Oblivion, and before Skyrim, and that I would have been the audio director on those projects. That would have been pretty freaking cool. He ended up hiring Mark Lampert, who was somebody that we had hired at Ion as somebody that did like editing and sound design. That guy is a rock star. He is a consummate professional. He's one of the best people I've ever worked with. I could not be happier that it was him that got that gig. And I ended up doing some VO on Skyrim as a result of him going over there and saying, hey, you want to be a couple characters here. So that ended up working out in its own way. But I still think about what might have been.
I've made tons of mistakes early on. It's usually just like not responding to emails and phone stuff quickly enough. So that happens at the beginning of your career. But probably this isn't so much a mistake, more like I felt really, really stupid. So I was at an award show where, and I'm standing next to this guy, and he's being honored that evening for like a Lifetime Achievement Award. And it's Tim Schafer. Mm-hmm. And many of his games are like some of my favorite games that I've played: Day of the Tentacle, Full Throttle, Psychonauts. But I didn't know what he looked like. And I'm standing next to him, and I'm just like, hey, who are you? What do you do? And this was at the same time that like Ori was getting, we were at shows for awards as well, and it was just like really embarrassing because I'm like, this is like one of my childhood heroes. One of the reasons like I love games, and I was like, oh man, I didn't know what my hero looked like. It was just very embarrassing.
Oh, yeah, I got a good one kind of like that. I was with Amir, who knows, he's the guy from Supergiant who kind of knows everybody in the industry, and I don't know. I'm terrible with names and faces, or I'm okay with faces, but bad with names. And I think it was like Robin Hoenecke and the guy who, she was with the dude who made Katamari Damacy, like that guy. I don't know his name. I forget his name because, again, terrible names. But I was talking to them. I didn't know who he was, but I was just like talking about the PlayStation controller versus the Xbox controller, and like the analog sticks being here versus here. And I was like, I love Katamari. Like I brought it up totally, like Katamari I brought up, and I was like, man, I love Katamari, but the one on the Xbox I didn't like as much because the sticks weren't this, and then the mechanic didn't work as well because they weren't right next to each other, they're rolling the thing. And he was like, oh yeah, I agree. He was like agreeing with me, being very polite. And then like after we leave Amir, I was like, dude, that was the dude, that was the guy. No. So that was embarrassing, yeah. But no, yeah, that's one's the best I got, I think.
Well, I got kind of a similar to Alex sort of situation. I mentioned earlier I was feeling the different kinds of pressure on the industry where the AAA things are becoming a little less plentiful, and so how do I get on the other side of it? I mean, if there's going to be half the games are going to be casual now, how do I get into it? Well, you know, I'm trying to think these things out. And right around then, this guy I'd known from the industry, a biz dev guy, approached me about being the CEO of a game development studio that he had started to put together in Louisiana using all the Hurricane Katrina money. And I'm like, that's how I'm going to get on the other fucking side of it. So I'd say, yeah, I'll be a CEO. And so we're meeting government officials, we're getting studio space and all this stuff. And anyway, well, it turns out I'd known him for several years from just GDC and whatever. I thought I knew the guy, but then, you know, I went out there and I found out he wasn't quite as, you know, we didn't wind up clicking. I'd never seen him under pressure, and we handled pressure differently. And then being sort of, and also I happened to be getting divorced that same year. So, and actually, if you're getting divorced, if you're ending a big long-term relationship, you are certifiably insane for that first year. So I had those two things going against me. So I basically took an entire year of not writing any music, not trying to get any games. I basically had all this forward momentum that I just fucking killed. And then, of course, we didn't wind up, ultimately, it's no longer a company. So I'm not the CEO of a company, and I've been playing catch up on my game music career ever since. So, oops, but it seemed like the right idea at the time. You know, because we had like the Journey, our version of it. It was and everyone we talked to with the NDAs, they're like, oh fuck yeah, that game was fucking great. We were actually a little bit too early because it'd be a fucking great VR game. It was like just a couple of years early, but anyway, blah blah blah. So you know, thought I was making the right decision. You know, like really busting out of my comfort zone, and I was like the coyote. Like,
Cool, thank you guys.
You're welcome.
Hi. So, what's your favorite way to add intensity to a situation in your music? Is it an instrument, composition method? What kind of way?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it's about arrangement and production. A lot of sort of kind of the way I do most of the conveyance of anything with my writing is through production, I feel like. And you know, what instruments are playing the part? How are they playing it? What, you know, it's sort of it's all that stuff, the texture and color of what's happening and the intensity of it. Of what you're actually listening to and the intensity of the sound. All that stuff is sort of, I mean, it's pretty vague, I guess, but that stuff.
It's kind of a mix of something that Darren said earlier. I think it's incredibly important that the music matches the tone of exactly what's happening on screen. But sometimes even that's not enough. So there's a famous or infamous sequence in Ori where you're escaping water. And initially I just did what I would now describe as kind of generic action music, very, very busy. Although it's actually kind of the same piece that you hear in there now, but without the melody. At first I was like, oh, we don't need the melody, it's just an action scene. But something was missing, and I was just like, well, what would happen if we put the main theme on top? And I was like, and that was the thing that actually made it more intense, because it's a callback to the theme that the player has been hearing throughout the game. And it's the first time that you feel like the player feels like they're really having an impact on the world. So it's not like a traditional play more instruments and or just bang more percussion. It's actually a very, very simple solution, but because we've foreshadowed it for like 3 to 4 hours previously, now we get to play the full theme in all of its glory. It means well, hopefully it means that it really hits the player when they hear it. So it's a different kind of intensity, but sometimes like just playing a melody or a hook that has been prevalent throughout the game and then playing it in a really dominant way, that can be the way to increase intensity.
Well, that goes back to the thing when David Jaffe says, why does all this music suck? It's because we couldn't have the theme in there, because people get annoyed if the theme was in there. So we put the themes in there, and oh, shit, it's nice music all of a sudden. But we'd also, previous to that, every single fucking percussion instrument ever invented. Bang, bang, bang. More. Stack.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like both approaches. The God of War thing.
I would just echo what they've already said. They covered it really well.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you very much for doing this panel. And I wanted to ask, is there a specific moment where you look back on that is, it always gives you happiness to the point of giddiness, that you're like, thank God I am doing this as my career?
When we did Bastian in like the awards season where Bastian was nominated for stuff, we were at the VGAs and did the like red carpet thing at the VGAs. I got to spend like 15 minutes talking to Mark Hamill. It was like really, it was really good. I was like, this would never have happened if I wasn't like, this is a thing that, yeah, this is pretty cool. So that was good. That was a highlight. Yeah.
Well, for me, it was the first time I conducted publicly. You know, I mean, I'd done some conducting in the studio, and it's different. You know, the musicians are there; they're trying to help, and there's nobody. You know, it's a different environment. But I swear, when you walk out on stage and there's 1,000 eyes staring you in the back, you feel it. It's something else. And so, yeah, I was doing the God of War thing, and there was a lot of percussion prelays that were on a D88 tape with click that I had printed previous, and I even printed the click a little bit ahead because I knew I'd have to conduct a little ahead, and I was not that great of a conductor. But yeah, I got out there and I had him start it, and I swear the click, it sounded like. And I'm like, oh, something's wrong. But I'm gonna have to. It's like the sample rate must be wrong. So, but I'm gonna have to go with it because the percussion's gonna be at that speed. And as it turns out, no. I was in bullet time from the adrenaline. Yeah. It was like I was outside of my body. Yeah. I was like a better conductor than I'd ever been because it was just like. Yeah. And then I could realize. And then then I could see it, like I could see it in like a session. The audio. It's like, here's the click, here's the prelay. Yeah. Here's the orchestra. Yeah. And so if my baton is like right in there, it's like I got to put my baton in front of the click. And so I had the presence of mind to do it, and then I felt the orchestra. They were supposed to have a click, but then the headphone shit didn't work or something. Yeah. So it's just me. Yeah. They're following me with prelays, and so, so I put it in front, and I was like, and I felt the entire orchestra just slowly, stand by stand, melt forward in time. Yeah. It was just like I felt like a big grown-up composer that day.
Cool. For better or for worse.
I got the obvious. The obvious answers for me is working at Abbey Road last year and doing the award stuff. Awards are funny, but they're really fun, especially if you're drunk. And I think also like going back to the water chase sequence from Ori, because that was the first like set piece that we finished. And it's not just the water chase; it's like the cut scene after, and then the scene afterwards when Ori wakes up in the swamp. Mm-hmm. And when we finished that for the first time, because that really is all connected, and I was like, okay, we've got something special here. And it was actually the moment that the whole team thought that we had something special. Like after we finished that sequence, everyone was like, that's the game. Like this is like the lowest point and the highest point all in 5 minutes. Like if we had to pitch it like in retrograde, like that's what we would have shown. So like once we finished that for the first time, which was like a year before we shipped, like so to have like the identity of the game, which that might be a lot of time, I don't know, but it feels like a lot of time now. Yeah. That was really big. I think the other thing for me, this is very personal, but I'll reveal it because I've told a few people now. But like, so I come from a family which is not musical at all. My father's a chemist, my mother's an English teacher, both sets of grandparents are military. My grandmother was building bombs in World War II. So I've had for most of my career, you know, when are you going to get a real job? Like when are you going to stop playing at being a composer? And then like I just got a message from my mother like probably like 6 months after Ori came out, and like my dad had just said to my mother like, oh, he's really a composer now. And that was like really big for me. And then I think just to like extend that, because we recorded at Abbey Road last year, I was actually able to take them to work. Like they can actually see how incredibly crazy recording sessions are. And we recorded 135 minutes of music in 3 days with 93 players, and not stemming, like the whole orchestra together. My father was a chemist, but he also did logistics. So and I was like, you're going to enjoy this because like it's basically me that put all this together. Yes, the contractor does a lot of the work, but like someone has to make the first phone call. And yeah, I was like, this is what I do. So that was like really cool. So that like those are all like kind of the things. There's career stuff and there's personal stuff. Like the personal validation, I think, is important for every composer, because not, and especially from my point, well, especially for everyone, but like not coming from a musical family. Like my parents do not have a musical bone in their body. They are really terrible musicians. So I don't know what went wrong with me, but apparently, I guess it all worked out.
I'll make it really, really quick. There's lots of moments getting to work, with a team and with people like Warren Spector, working with an orchestra in Seattle, working with people like BT, working with David Bowie's guitarist Reeves Gabrels, directing, what's his name? Dwayne Johnson, that's right, for Spy Hunter. It's just, there's lots of moments where you just, you're in there or you're meeting somebody that's an inspiration, that has been your childhood hero, it's fantastic. Right now is one of those moments, but I can't actually talk about it. It's just like, I'm not vague booking, as a matter of fact.
Vague
but it's
paneling.
Yeah, exactly, vague paneling. I am allowed to say that I am assisting Retro Studios with something. And so that, that is like, a childhood dream. It's something that is also the most challenging and fulfilling work I've ever been a part of. We'll see what happens. But it's funny, like even after projects are released, like we cannot say a thing except that we contributed to them. And so like there's a lot of very Big N really likes to keep stuff all nice and quiet. But it's an amazing team, amazing work, and it's one of the really I'm amazed that I'm here doing what I'm doing.
Well, thank you for making this moment for me.
Awesome. Thank you. So just so you know, we have 4 minutes left. Let's do like really, really speed answer, like one person answer for each question. We'll do really fast, and then also we're going to be doing a signing in like a half hour.
Also, he's doing a panel at 3 o'clock in panels 4, and I'm doing a panel at 4:30 in panels 4 after him. So if you have more questions,
I'll be drinking.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Do any of you have a moment when you're composing and you have this moment of choice paralysis where you can change a sound or change a note or whatever, and you have a million different ways you can do it and you don't know which way to go? And if you do, how do you manage that?
I'm gonna do this really quick. Okay, I will literally just like try shit and see how it sounds. That's just like, okay, well, let's try this. Well, let's try that. And I will just try it until it sounds good. And if I don't get there, I will put it aside and move on to something else.
Try everything, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, it doesn't. It honestly, it's like it could be anything. It really could. And so just based on what you've started, see what would either be a cool contrast or what would help it move in the direction it's moving. Those are the questions I ask. Yeah.
Sometimes if I get stuck, I'll just put it on a loop, turn it down really low, and take a nap right there. It'll have it just like.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hi, this is a question specifically for Darren. I was wondering, was it an easy decision to go from freelance contract work, composing music for whoever, to becoming an in-house audio director and composer? Why or why not? I mean, the pants thing is a big con. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, though, I was full time before I moved and worked out of the studio. So I was not wearing pants for a good portion of when I was full time. It was a very easy decision. It's absolutely the most interesting, creatively fulfilling work I've ever done, and it allows me to have my day job be the thing I love. So it was just an absolute no-brainer.
Thanks.
Hey y'all, how you doing? So real quick, short question. Do you prefer, when you're able to keep the rights in the work and license it back to the artist, or do you prefer to assign it or do work for hire? And what do you end up doing more often?
I prefer to retain whatever portion of rights that I can,
Cool.
So that can be either used for performance royalties, and certain people have taught me about this. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
So yes, like I like to be able to retain like soundtrack rights if I possibly can for redistribution, or if like there's a sequel that there's actually some sort of at least a little additional payment if there's a whole new project that my stuff is being used in, or something like that.
Sequels and soundtrack rights, like it's horrendous what the big studios want to try and take for the soundtrack rights, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, usually it's great if you can own it, and then you can do whatever you want without having to deal with anything. But yeah, the big publishers are almost never gonna let you own it. But most of the smaller publishers, even if they're paying you the full-on big boy pants rate, big boy no pants rate, they'll
no pants rate, yeah.
They'll let you usually keep it because they're not gonna do anything with it. So they don't know what to do with it. So yes, like to do it. No for the big publishers is usually the answer.
All right, let's see if we can do this really fast. It's one right now.
So usually, I'm just getting into this. I usually make hip hop beats for rappers. What's a good advice for transitioning into making music for like games and stuff, other than for rappers?
Keep making hip hop and make it for games. No, I'm not. No, seriously, I'm not kidding. Like use what you've got power to do and like apply it.
Somewhere there's a game that is calling out for
I would love to play games.
You gotta find that
more
person who's making that game.
Yeah, lean into it really hard. That's my advice. Is just like do
the best.
Do the thing that you do just super awesome, and like do that, like make it real you, and like somebody's gonna want that.
Cool, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Diwa. I've been a film composer in the Philippines for 20 years, and I just moved to America two months ago, and I want to start writing for games. What is your advice for someone like me?
Don't do it. Run!
Yeah.
Run for the hills.
I don't know. Honestly, I really don't know how to break into the industry. Honestly, I have no idea coming to stuff like this and GDC and other things and meeting developers and just making personal connections with developers and other composers is probably a good way to go. If I become friends with composers whose work I enjoy and somebody comes to me and says, hey, can you do this project for me? I'll be like, no, I'm full-time at Supergiant, but I know this guy who's real talented and would does contract work and would be a great fit. So making friends, I think, is a really good way.
And if you've been writing 20 years of film and TV music in the Philippines, you probably have some kind of special thing that is you. And if you can figure out who's making the game that you are perfect for, boom.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, we're going to be doing a signing in a half hour down in the bottom floor, I believe, in the
Expo Hall.
Expo Hall. Yeah, it's the red autograph area, I guess. So yeah, see you there. Hopefully, and thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.